We go from a place of abiding in Christ to growing in the Lord and bearing much fruit. And then we have seasons in which we bear fruit, and then seasons in which we're drawn back. God begins to prune us. In other words, He cuts things out of our lives. He takes responsibilities off of us. We step back from all of the activity and spend time resting and abiding in Christ again, renourishing ourselves, strengthening ourselves to go back to a place of growth and back to a place of bearing fruit for the Lord. And you think about your Christian life, when you're at your best, when I'm at my best, it's because I'm living according to that framework. It's not all activity all the time. There are moments of rest, abiding in the Lord, pruning things out of my life, re-energizing myself, and then swinging back to a place of bearing much fruit. For a vine bearing, for a grape branch to bear grapes, it's all about timing. So Jesus, using this analogy, that's not incidental. It's absolutely, it mimics our spiritual life so well. It's kind of crazy. If you want to bear fruit for the Lord, then you've got to spend time abiding in the Lord. You can't bear fruit for the Lord unless you're abiding in the Lord. And the text says if you don't abide in the Lord and you're trying to bear fruit and you don't bear fruit because you're not abiding, then the vine dresser pulls out the branch and throws it to the side and it's burned. And I don't know what that means, but it doesn't sound pretty, so you don't want to do that. You want to bear fruit for the Lord? Well, you got to spend time abiding in the presence of Jesus Christ. And if I could take you back to the first century and we were going to grow grapes together, which is probably something we wouldn't do because I don't know anything about growing grapes, even if it was in the first century. But let's say that we were. You would know that if you're going to plant a grape orchard, that you would prepare the soil, cultivate everything. You would plant the vine, and then you would let that vine grow for at least 3 years before you ever let it bear any fruit. I remember my grandma had a grape orchard on the side of her beauty shop. It produced the worst tasting grapes I'd ever tasted. And I never knew anything about growing grapes, but since then I've learned a little bit. So you let the grapes grow for 3 years before they ever produce grapes, because there's something that takes place during those 3 years that strengthens the branches to the degree that they can actually sustain the fruit that they were intended to bear. So you've got a vine dresser. Every time that a branch would begin to flower out and begin to bear fruit, what the vine dresser would do is he would snip, cut the branch back, and for 3 years he would do this. And the reason is because it was during those 3 years that branch, being attached to the vine, was growing stronger and stronger and stronger, so that on year 4, when it came time to bear fruit, not only could it sustain the grapes that it was meant to bear, but it could do so without falling over and dropping all of the grapes to the floor. It had the kind of robust strength that was necessary to bear the fruit that it was intended to bear. And in the same way, you think about your spiritual life. There must be seasons of abiding with Jesus, being renewed and strengthened so that you can become the kind of spiritual branch that can bear the kind of fruit that you were intended to bear. And without seasons of pruning, you would end up just this overgrown branch, very, very long, but very, very weak and very incapable of sustaining the kind of fruit you were intended to bear. So every